Kua huhi mai nei, kei te timata tēnei, hui ki te karakia, me inoi tātou kei te timata. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hau, Ti hei mauri ora, kia ora Yana Saw. Welcome back. Okay, we've got, I think this can be a short hui today, but let's see how we go. So the meeting's been live streamed. We don't have any public at this stage, correct? Yes. Okay, let's start with some apologies. Lateness, Councillor Ponta. Councillor Saw is here, so she's not an apology. Councillor Duffy, and we've got Simon online. Is that right? Can I have someone move?
I think Councillor Laban. We have him. He sent through a text
Late.
saying Donna is retiring today. 1980 to 2025.
180 years. That's
Donna wins.
worth a celebration.
Donna wins.
So he's at Donna's
He's an
celebration.
apology, kapai, and an apology from Councillor Laban. Can I have someone move? Kia ora, Yana. Second. Kia ora. Mr. Nash. Okay, all in favour? Here we go, conflict of interest declarations. Okay, public participation. Nothing online we know of. Okay, can I take the minutes as read from the last week? Do we have any changes? No? Right, can I have... Yes, kia ora. Councillor Nash, second. Councillor Staples. All in favour? Aye, kia ora. Okay, can I just double check with you where we're at? We're waiting for any manuhiri.
They'll come in.
Okay, when they're ready. Okay, workshop. Okay, kia ora. Welcome, Brett. No mai. Te Tiriti o Waitangi work program update. Do we have something to put online for people?
No presentations.
Okay,
Just the paper.
Over to you.
Hi, kapai. I've got Anna Nichols supporting today, who helped write the paper. So there's no changes to the paper, so we can take it as read. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, let's open it to councillors. I know you all read the papers. Comments? Information. Yeah. Okay, kia ora, thank you. No questions. Our next up. Oh, sorry, kia ora, Ross.
So I guess we're not quite at the end of the training, but we are nearly at the end of the training. If you could reflect back on what you think, not so much on individual work projects, but kind of across the board, what the Tiriti Committee has achieved, what would your reflections be? And how do you see that moving into the next training? Like, do you consider this has been valuable, and should we continue to have this Tiriti Committee, and where would you like to see it head in the next 3 years?
Oh, yeah. That's a big question. Okay, so if I can reflect on where the committee started, where we're finished, coming to now, there was a period of development, finding its feet, figuring out where to go. Key decisions, the opportunity to establish the Māori constituency, a really big kaupapa that has provided another platform for Māori of the region to be able to input into the regional governance space. I think for me, if I personally focus in on the thing that I think is the most beneficial for this committee, is creating those foundations of partnership with mana whenua, the ability to take this meeting out to marae, to interact with mana whenua at place, and creating those partnership opportunities. If we look to the regional wānanga that we had back in February, our partners were talking a lot about the need to be operating in partnership at the right level. So I would say that would be one of the key areas of benefit. It doesn't sit within the work program necessarily, but I think it's a really important part. I would also say that the ability for councillors to have conversations within their own rights around representation and governance for mana whenua, the conversations that we've been having over the last probably couple of 3 months have been really beneficial and really, really important to understand the opportunities for governance and representation going forward from a council perspective as well. So another really, really good bit. In terms of the longevity of the committee, I would, very much support that partnership space moving forward in a really deliberate way into the future. Our mana whenua partners are asking for it, so this is a way that we can consider how to work in that space.
Nice answer. I guess at the risk of crystal ball gazing, because obviously you can't predict the future and you're not an elected member, but we've talked about ways we could rearrange our committee structure to better include mana whenua in a number of ways. Would you like to see mana whenua included in this committee, or do you think there are better ways that we can incorporate the voice of mana whenua into our committee structure?
Who would like to answer that?
Yeah, kia ora. Perhaps I'll have a crack at that. It's a good question and a good answer. Thanks, Brett. Look, we actually have, in the workshop, there's a little piece we were going to start the workshop with. You preempted a very good question, Ros, with something we'd started to look at. Some reflections on the committee and it's how it kind of evolved and how it's been working and some of the highlights. And I think there are a lot of highlights. And I think Brett gave a very good answer. I think that a lot of it is based around the foundations of partnership with mana whenua and some of the experiential pieces going out onto marae and working, listening and understanding to get a really, really good foundation about what true partnership actually looks like. So we actually have some more reflection on that. So great segue into that. Thank you. In terms of what the committee could look like into the future, I think that is an open question. It is very much a political question, to be honest, and I think you have a workshop planned prior to the end of this training where one of the reflections you'll do as a council is looking at things like committee structures, like committee structures, and having a think about what sort of successes have occurred and what sort of briefing or advice you might want to provide to an incoming councillor around those very questions. And I think that is completely the right place to have that korero, and it's completely the right place for an outgoing council to provide some advice to an incoming council. So there will absolutely be an opportunity to discuss that question in some detail.
Thank you for this update. I guess in the work program, I wanted to understand, I get a sense of the breadth of work Te Hanga Whiriwhiri is expected to do in that the committee work. And I guess it would be helpful to understand, I guess in a case study way or at an operational or delivery level, how the mahi you're all participating in works across group areas. Would we be able to see that next time in an update, just to get a flavour of what sort of work your team is having to do and how we might be able to support that here at this committee?
The workshop afterwards will show a bit of a high-level time frame about some of the work, the foundation work that Te Hanga Whiriwhiri is doing to create conditions for partnership. And so what you'll see, and what I hope you have seen within the report, the update, is some of the mahi that we're doing to ensure that the decisions made here, the operational side of Greater Wellington, is also ready and fit for purpose to implement that work.
I've got a question. So when we started the, I guess the administration of the komiti, we spent a bit of time talking about a work program, and I know that you put that in some of the papers you sent me. I'm interested to know if we found that work program helpful in terms of guiding the direction of travel for the komiti. Understanding that this is a new committee, it is developing, and we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on a bunch of things that were meaningful to our people. So, can you respond to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the things that stuck out for me preparing the paper was the time between sort of stand-up of komiti and the development of that work program. A lot of work went into understanding what the vision for the komiti was, working with members to come up with things that we felt were going to be important and drive the right outcomes for regional council. And for us in Te Onga Whiriwhiri, as we turned back around, as we developed and sort of emerged from our restructure, setting up the systems and processes for how we're going to work across the organisation, the guidance of the work program, the way it overlaid and overlapped with the likes of the PwC Tiriti audit, meant that we were able to again focus in on particular areas. I think it was an ambitious work program, and we've learnt as we've gone as well, but the fact that we were able to discuss and make those linkages between that governance space and the operational management space was really helpful to us as we were coming through our work program development and looking at how we actually operationalise that work into the council.
Councillor Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. Yes, the things that I find of concern to me is, and it's happens in lots of areas, there seem to often be a feeling that we're waiting for mana whenua to for their involvement in issues and that. And I feel that we should just be getting on with things and making sure that our iwi partners are aware that we're doing so. I don't think it does any good for our partners to have a feeling that we're waiting for them to get an answer around things and that happens not just locally, but when not just here, but also in Pororoa when I'm dealing with issues there with our council and that sort of thing. And I don't think that does any good for any of us. So I think I want to make that point. The second point is that I'd like to see a greater focus on all Māori rather than mana whenua iwi. In Pororoa, if my numbers are right, Ngāti Toa represent about 15% of the total Māori in the area. And I think that some of the work we do, we get very little reporting back on those general work with other Māori in regard to commercial interests and the things we're doing there. There's a good example of the fish ladders, and I know Luke from Ngāti Toa was a person reporting there, but the work and things like that, we were working closely with Māori and those things. I'd like to see a broader reporting back, not just related to iwi, but of course Māori across our whole community. And I think that's an important thing for me because although we take guidance from iwi, in many cases, when I talk to other Māori and that, there's a feeling that there's a separation there. And we may have a greater, we have a greater responsibility to mana whenua, but I think that we should be looking at the interests of all Māori because the issues we're dealing with are often socio-economic rather than just Māori issues and that. And if we can show that we're working in a strong way there, I feel that we were achieving more for all of us together. And so that's what's on my mind. Thank you.
Councillor Kirkpatrick, just a pass over your statement. So which pan Māori organisations do you think the council can engage with?
I think the things that I've seen is when we're doing commercial work, we've got a policy when we're working with Māori, they've got to be 50% I think Maori employees or Maori-owned organisations and that, and they're not necessarily iwi, they're all Maori in that, and I'd like to see broader reporting on things like that. I think that's important to me. I think that the issues we're facing are broader than a close association with iwi, and I would have thought that iwi have a shared interest with us in seeing what we can help for Māori across our whole community on that.
Okay, so, sorry, is it appropriate to make suggestions to officials at this point? Ka pai, hiki tia. So, actually, Councillor Kirkman makes a good point. There are pan-Māori organisations out there across our region who are doing great things. They have fantastic relationships with mana whenua across the whole rohe, and it might be a good idea if we, in the future, thought about how we reported on some of the mahi that they're doing across our region from a transport, economic, treaty perspective. Is that something that would be a good recommendation for us to include in our framing for the future? Councillor Lee, sorry, kia ora. You wanted to say something else, Councillor Keith?
I want to add something in there. I've been lucky to work closely with Kaumātua from Ngāti Toa and
really,
through
I
the
haven't.
Whiti
Thank you
Rail
for that.
Polytech and that. And the point I'm making there is that we had a more generic approach to a lot of the issues we were dealing with in that. And I think that's important to me. Now, other people may feel differently, but where I sit on it and that, I'd like to see that broader inclusion. Also, one of the things that we don't look at, we should be looking at our numbers of Māori across our organisation, all levels of management and that. Just as Ngāti Toa, I think with Oregon, I think it is environmental group, they've got people working there in a sort of building skills capacity and that. And we should be making sure that we've got that spread right across our organisation, right up through our executive leadership team, sort of thing. And it's not the Te Hunga Whiri grouping, but it's rather Māori across the rest there and that. And I think this is an important approach because what I see in business is that's the approach that happens in business. It's right across the organisation. And I think that's important. And I'm not sure that we do direct reporting on that. We may do reporting on numbers, but it's something more than that. It's about different levels of management, what's a penetration of Māori who are within those areas and that. And I think we should be looking at those things.
Councillor, I can feel some outcomes coming on. Kia ora, Councillor Lee.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if we look back over almost 2.5 years, the committee has actually achieved significant outcomes. But I guess what is probably important is less about focus on what the achievement, but what are the gaps if we look back, and because the gaps or what could we have done better as opportunities for version 2.0. So what would you say? What would we look at in terms of the next term? And it could be like resourcing, because it is about stretching resources or being more strategic in terms of having the committee in a more of a stronger governance position.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, ka pai. Thank you, Councillor Lee. I think to answer both parts to your question and also your statement there, Councillor Cook, is we've got Te Whāriki Māori Outcomes Framework, and so that's a really big commitment that Greater Wellington, including yourselves, have committed to, and that is Māori outcomes. And so it does support us towards more authentic partnership with mana whenua, but it's also with Māori. The outcomes in there are high level, they are achievable over a long period of time. And in the report, we talk about the need to have a Te Whāriki strategic plan. Now, once that plan is developed, then we'll be able to monitor and report on those things. And the idea or the understanding is that the reporting will also provide updates in terms of what you're talking about in social procurement, so Māori businesses, It should support Te Matarawa Māui and what they report on, so we should have strong alignment to that.
Remind us who they are, Te Matarawa Māui.
Te Matarawa Māui are our regional Māori procurement board, economic development board. We help support the development of that strategy and also committed to it as well. It's similar to what we've done with Mari Tūhono. Again, this is a biodiversity framework, Te Ao Māori approach. It helps support partnership, but it's about supporting communities who work within Te Tai Ao. So again, once these things are in place, we'll be able to monitor and report these. That's kind of the second tranche, and that's what the report in PwC referred to as well. We kind of have to set the foundations and set the frames to be able to report meaningfully on these things. In terms of those gaps that you mentioned, Councillor Lee, I think it's that. I think it's understanding that knowing what we need to do first to be able to have a plan in place, and we have a bit more of we've got a direction in sight, and we have a bit more of a know-how to do those things. And given Taonga Whiriwhiri to support this work, we're quite new too, and as Brett mentioned, we went through a bit of a restructure because we knew more and we understood actually what we needed in terms of like resources, capabilities, the setup of a group, the operating model, how would we support all this work.
The only thing I'll add there is I think both questions sort of suggested the answer as well in terms of how we report through to council and create visibility over the work that we're doing. How we create visibility internally across the organisation for our internal systems processes, such as recruitment and HR, how we monitor the Kaimahi Māori. Also, how we look externally and actually show how we're supporting Māori communities across the region. So for me, that's right down to actually how we report through to this komiti in a meaningful way that helps the governance decision making have visibility over what's happening at that operational and management level.
Can I ask one final question? So in relation to what you report back, you're a whole organisation, so I'm going to assume that reporting back will include some of the mahi that actually is done by our research, evaluation, monitoring teams, our transport team. There's some great wins that are happening in partnerships across some of those other pieces of work, which I don't necessarily see through funnel here, but I do see that you provide advice. But I just wonder about that. So you don't have to respond, but I'm just suggesting that actually the framing of the report backs in terms of what you're achieving, I think will be really valuable to any future komiti.
I will respond to that if that's all right.
Okay.
So that is part of our strategic plan, understanding the direction, the work that we're doing, and being able to, deliver that across the organisation and create the right reporting mechanisms internally, so that the information that's coming up and through to Tiriti Komiti is reflective of the whole organisation, not just Te Taonga Whiriwhiri, because we're well aware that whilst we have a significant amount of work and responsibility within the Māori outcomes space, it's the organisation's responsibility to meet and achieve.
Ngā mihi nui ki a korua, mō tō mahi. We'll go to our next item if that's okay. Kia ora, Verity. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Kia ora. Auditor General's report. Over to you, Verity.
Tēnā koutou e aku rangatira. Take the report as read. Would it be helpful if I added a few introductory comments?
Great, thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Well, this has been quite an issue in the media recently, and we've been working on this audit, we were brought into scope through the Ngāti Toa settlement, and we've been working on this audit since before I started, I think probably the last year. It was quite a long and intensive process, involved a preliminary report, a draft report, and then the final recommendations. It's the first in-depth review of the wider Crown system's performance delivering on treaty settlements, and the recommendations, there were 9 key recommendations, and in the report we've set out the ones that affect us most. The recommendations weren't a surprise. We had anticipated them and had actually started work on those. In particular, one of them relates to ensuring that our whare or our organisation is set up as best as it can to clearly understand what our commitments are to those treaty settlements, assign responsibility, accountability, and be able to report clearly on those commitments. The recommendations build on the PwC audit recommendations, but they provide us useful detail on certain things that hadn't been picked up in the PwC report, for example, including settlement delivery in our annual reporting. And I think one of the key themes in the Auditor General's report was the need for organisations to understand and deliver on the holistic intent of those settlements. So rather than viewing them as a series of discrete contractual commitments that you are to tick off, but actually to lift up and understand what those settlements were intending to achieve, which was a reset in the relationship or the partnership between Māori and the Crown. I think we're pretty well placed to do that because of 30 years of relationships and developing partnerships. So we're in a different position to some other organisations. We've got a really strong foundation to build on, and it's a matter of making improvements and refinements within our system, but we have that foundation there, and I'd suggest that this komiti is a key part of that. So is there anything else, or should we go to questions?
Do we have any pātai from councillors? I'm just wondering also, thank you, Councillor Connolly, just briefly before that, for those of us in the room who may not have read the report, just a quick synopsis of what the Auditor General's report actually said.
Sure. Sure.
In plain English would be great.
I'll have to summarise the report if it's in plain English, Chair. So the Auditor General was looking at whether public sector arrangements actually support public organisations to fulfil those commitments, and how well the public organisations are positioned to meet those legal and contractual commitments and understand any risks. Effectively, the Auditor General found that the public sector arrangements, so the oversight of the public sector, doesn't adequately support us to meet our commitments or fulfil the intent of settlements, and that the system doesn't fully understand the risk to durability of settlements and how critical, how important this is. And the report made 9 recommendations. 3 of them don't really relate directly to us, and then from page 19 of the order paper there is a table which sets out the key recommendations. I think the fundamental one for us is the first one, which I think I mentioned we had anticipated and are working on, which is that all organisations review how they plan to meet their commitments. And that includes our policies, our systems, our processes, our lines of accountability. So if someone asked us how many settlement commitments do we have, who's responsible for them, and what's their status, we have all that in one place, and it's clear. So we're doing a current state assessment of that at the moment, and we're also as a result of the report, will include in scope what resourcing is required across the organisation to ensure that we can do that, including preparing for future settlement negotiations up the Kapiti coast.
Remind us how many settlements we're facing as a council.
So we've got 4 settlements and roughly 50 settlement commitments.
Ka pai. Honolulu.
So I'm not sure whether having a favourite agenda item is a bit like having a favourite child, but this was my favourite agenda item. It was really interesting. It was also a little bit horrifying from my perspective. When it says, the second paragraph where it says Te Pane Matua Taio is responsible for approximately 50 of these settlement commitments across 4 settlements. I wouldn't be able to begin to tell you what 50 settlement commitments we have. I'm fairly familiar with these settlements over in Kahungunu because I went to that treaty settlement, and also, for the implications for our committees, we've discussed it quite a lot. But what the others are, look, I have no idea. And so it was a little bit horrifying to read the fact that we are just as guilty as other public sector agencies and not really having visibility over what our commitments are and having no real plan to deliver on those. And so you've outlined, I guess, where to quite well in this paper. And I'm really keen to actually read the Auditor General's report over the weekend, and I've downloaded it with that intention. But I guess I just feel like this paper needs a recommendation from us as a committee that that full list of settlement commitments will be brought back along with a plan to deliver it. I know that's the gist of this paper, but it never actually culminated in a recommendation from this committee, and I feel like this is of sufficient importance to warrant the committee giving that direction, that we really need to see that. What kind of time are you thinking to bring back that audit?
Through the chair.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. If I may clarify, in terms of an understanding of our settlement commitments, we do have that, and our partnerships provide that that key foundation or that key system that supports us to understand how we're going and track our progress. We just got a little bit of there's an opportunity internally to just bring all of that into one place. So it's not like we don't have visibility, and we are actually delivering on those settlement commitments. So it's the report speaks quite generally across the system, and so sometimes those findings can be applied to all of the public organisations, but actually when you lift up our hood and look at how we're doing pretty well. It's just about being able to quickly and easily demonstrate that. So it's the processes and systems that sit in behind. In terms of your question of timing?
Well, I think it's obviously fantastic that that staff have a good understanding of what those commitments are and how we're delivering on them. Maybe I've been living under a rock and are particularly poor with my understanding, but I don't think governance has that same understanding. So I think it's really important to raise that up to this committee or even to council, so that we're aware of it. So would other people support a wee recommendation if I was to work one up now?
Okay. So can we come back to that, Councillor Staples? And then I'm going to go to Nigel.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. My concern, my comment was going to be exactly along the same lines as Councillor Connolly. At a governance level, this is happening around us and not clear as far as I'm concerned. And given the pressures that governance are under at the moment for budget restraint, I really need to know exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what else needs to be done and where that's going to fit into our budget, because nothing ever comes free these days and we can't do everything. So totally supporting what Councillor Connolly said, and unless it's a really off-the-wall recommendation, I'll second it.
We're going to come back to that and have it up in front so everyone can see it. Nigel, can I?
Yeah, sure, Chair. Look, thanks for the korero, thanks for the report. Look, When we were invited or requested to be part of this, we saw this as a fantastic opportunity for Te Pane Mātawatāia. Look, Monarch and I spent some considerable time with the people from the OAG compiling this report. It was a really good discussion. It was at least an hour and a half from memory, pretty robust and clear. And I think a couple of things I would like to mention. As Verity said, the report itself is very generic. It's covering 6 entities, central government and local government entities. I think we were the only regional council, one other regional council. So I felt we were in a privileged position to be able to participate in this because it was going to be a great learning exercise for us. Some of the recommendations that have come through are going to be extremely advantageous for us to have. They will relate specifically to all of the Crown and local government, but for us they're very useful because we are involved in it. Support a recommendation if the committee would like to do that, that makes sense. The 2 other things, we're doing well. So this organisation is actually doing really quite well, and I think the process we went through and the type of conversation we had with the OAG and the things you won't read in a public report, but we could even get them to come in and talk about if you wanted at some later date, we stacked up pretty well across the public sector in terms of actually how we understand our obligations, how we participated in negotiate settlement processes, and how we're looking to implement them. I totally acknowledge that there's some more feedback loops we can do with the governance, and we will do that. It's one of the recommendations. Again, it's a good opportunity. The other thing I would say, and it was touched on earlier in this meeting, this is why we've invested in actually bringing Te Honga Whiriwhiri up to a point where they can actually do the mahi that's required of us. We had very little capacity to actually do some of this mahi, do some of the reporting, do some of the analysis of the things like treaty settlements and obligations and how we fulfill them. And we actually have the capability and capacity to do that now. And building off the treaty audit, building off the OAG and the complementary recommendations of both of those, we can actually bring back to what you're looking for and do it in a way that will be robust and I think is one of the exemplars across the regional sector, actually. So, just some
Kia ora,
observations
Nigel.
from each.
Thank you. So my sense is that it's a visibility issue, but also understanding the breadth and the depth. We won't be able to do everything. We're obviously not part of the whole 50, but the things that relate to regional council, Greater Wellington Regional Council, be really valuable for us to understand and see that reflected probably in whatever future work program should the committee continue in the next training. So can we turn to the recommendation that's been, thank you, Ross. We're just going to put it up. Sorry, we're just going to put them both up and I'll let you fellas decide. I would love that opportunity.
Elizabeth, I think Francis has provided a suggested recommendation as well, if you got that.
Trying to put both up.
Oh, got you, sorry.
Yep. Technology issues.
Split screen.
Split screen, I'm happy to read them out. Okay, we're going back to the old technology team. Okay, Rosa's recommendation.
Want me to read out my one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sorry, it was very quickly done. That the Tiriti Komiti requests that officers bring a report back to the next committee meeting outlining all of GWRC's existing treaty settlement commitments and a plan for delivery and monitoring of these commitments.
Just the one below.
That officers report to the next committee meeting on the details of the treaty settlements relating to Greater Wellington, progress with implementation and any issues arising.
Thoughts? Happy to. Okay, we don't need to vote on this, do we? But somebody choose one. Me?
Yeah.
Rosa's one.
Okay.
Okay, can I have someone to move?
So I moved it, Councillor Staples.
Second it. Kia ora. Who's in favour? Kia ora. It was just an information paper. Next. Kia ora. Thank you very much, Koroa. Great mahi. Submissions, positions, implications on Māori rights and interests. Tawhiwhirangi Skipper. He's a famous name right there. In case you didn't know, whānau. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora koutou anō. Just to start with, there is we just want to change something in the paper. It's for information, not for decision. So if that can be corrected, yeah.
Just a point of clarification, there are recommendations in the report, so it should be a decision report, even though the noting recommendations is still for decision.
Ka pai.
Okay.
We'll keep it as a decision, yeah?
Yeah, decision be. What would the decision be? To note. Okay.
You've got 3 recommendations in there. Notes that the committee notes the current and proposed government reforms, notes Greater Wellington's ongoing approach to ensure Māori rights, and notes Greater Wellington's ongoing commitment.
Ka pai. Yeah. I'd like to introduce Tawhiwhirangi Skipper, who is the author of the report. She's part of Te Unga Whiriwhiri, one of our senior advisors who's been working across with Ropu Taiao, corporate services, strategy group on the government reforms around submissions, positions and implications on Māori rights and interests. So you would have seen reports come through to multiple committee hui and council hui around these things, and TAF and Verity have had a role to play in that. So I'll just introduce TAF to take us through.
Kia ora, can you take us through the paper? Kia ora, Tawhiwhirangi.
Morena koutou. It's been quite a tough time with the government reform mahi. As we know, not just for regional council, but the impacts on Māori rights and interests as well, because it's been coming in staggered procession. Our understanding of the impacts have kind of accumulated over time. And so this paper is an attempt at trying to
put them into one place where we can start to see what has happened to date. And so we can also anticipate what might be coming with the other reforms. Still big things to come, like RM replacement. And the Regulatory Standards Bill was introduced yesterday with the Urgent Waitangi Tribunal report put out on Friday. But I'll just go through that to date. And predating me, we had the fast track approvals submission. I started in August 2024, so that was before me. And Verity also wrote the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill for Greater Wellington. But further on from that, we have been working with Ngā Kairapu, which is a Māori special interest groups that's part of Te Urukahika, to feed into Te Urukahika's submission around RM Bill 2. We've also worked with corporate services around all of the different water reforms, Water Done Well, the National Water Performance Standards, and then we're also expecting this month the National Direction Package, which will include the NPSFM. I'm saying acronyms at times because I can't remember the full names. So there's a lot that has happened and there's a lot more to come. And so what we're trying to do here is to give you an outline. I tried my best, but it won't always be the perfect way to describe things around the different impacts for Māori rights and interests and for our mana whenua partners. It's all coming at pace, and so the ability to submit concisely is hard, both for us and for our mana whenua partners. We are trying to work to support them. We are sharing information with them where that's appropriate, and we are also offering our support. Sometimes, mainly Ngāti Toa are taking us up on that offer. Rangitane is also submitting at times, and then others are just asking us questions, and they're also appreciative of the information from us. So we will continue to do that. Where do I start? Because there's lots here. So the pace is one of the issues for everybody. The effect on our communities, on our Māori communities and our non-Māori communities who are supportive of what is happening at the moment. We have had to, as Māori communities, band together more. Obviously the hikoi was a big one, but there's lots of different rōpū as well, like Toitū Te Tiriti, which brought the claim for the Regulatory Standards Bill. So there's a lot of, I guess the main point though is that the big R word, racism, is a big topic of conversation in our communities, and it's not a nice place to be. You have to work out whether you're in a safe space or whether you need to tread lightly and carefully. The RM is a big erosion of Māori participation in planning. I'm not technical in the environment space, so I'm not going to attempt to try and break that down, but I have had rōpū taiao support in the paper around that. We've also got water allocation and rights that's coming through in the RM Bill 3. So currently we don't have a great system for us. We have the first in, first served method. That hasn't been favourable, especially for Māori who haven't settled yet because they haven't had the chance to go and have their water allocation rights, but we don't know what's coming. And the cabinet paper doesn't support necessarily a supportive one for Māori. So up in the air, don't know, but probably not favourable. We have lots of legislation where we have the stripping of rights separately, and so it's not done consistently. It's not done, so for example, fast track approvals, they've put mainly in favour of settlements only. So that strips everybody who hasn't settled yet. They have allocated for mana whakahono arohe, But the confusion is when you get to RM Bill 3, Cabinet has said that that's up for review. What does that mean? You know, our joint agreements, what does that mean? And then there is a provision that has been indicated will provide some kind of treaty clause, but we don't know what it'll be. And we do know, though, that Cabinet has ruled out Section 8 of the RM, which asks, is it give effect to, or what's the RM Section 8?
It's the general treaty clause.
Yeah, it's the general operative treaty clause. So they are definitely rolling that out of the new RM bill replacement. What else do we have? Another huge thing is not engaging or consulting with iwi and hapu around any of the changes that they are making. In the Cabinet paper for RM Bill 3, they have indicated that they will work with select groups from the iwi Chairs Forum. What's the name of the rōpū? Do you remember? It's in here, sorry, I'll just find it.
Is that the iwi leaders group? The National Iwi Chairs Forum?
It's in there.
Yeah.
So we've got Te Taikaha and the National Iwi Chairs Forum. There's a rōpū in there that considers environmental matters. So rather than go directly to iwi and hapu around these, they are coming at pace and they're not being consulted on. Do you have any other questions? That that your job?
Thank you. Happy to share jobs.
Sorry.
Kia ora, Councillor Connolly.
Me again. I'm on a roll today. So thank you so much for this paper, and I guess apologies that you had to write it. Like, it's just really embarrassing and upsetting that we're in the situation that we're in. My thought on the recommendations was that we should actually strengthen them. So as per the conversation we had at the beginning about it being a decision paper. So the second one is notes Greater Wellington's ongoing approach to ensure Māori rights and interests are taken into account. I was wondering how the committee would feel about, I mean, that's fine, and indeed that is correct, but how about a stronger recommendation whereby the committee disaffirms, I've just been trying to look in my thesaurus for a word that...
I've learned a new word.
Disaffirms any attempts by the Crown to reduce Māori rights and attempts to lessen Crown obligations as expressed in Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
Maybe rejects?
Well, I didn't know whether... I'm trying to channel Francis and whether he would have an issue with us rejecting
I'm sure he will.
as a... And I thought disaffirm kind of expressed our disapproval, but didn't necessarily, but kind of implied that we would still toe the line when it came to our obligations under the fast track. And
you raise an important point, Councillor Connolly, but I'm going to turn to the chair, the co-chair, and Nigel for an opinion on said possible recommendations. Who wants to start? You're our leaders, so we're going to look for some advice.
Yeah, kia ora. While I understand the intent of what Councillor Connolly is suggesting, there's a number of legislative processes going through the Crown at the moment, which are really well outlined in the paper and have been discussed. I think you just need to have a consideration as to whether or not you want to, as a council, make a recommendation with that degree of strength in it, because there are other opportunities for the council to participate in all the legislative processes as well as we go through different processes with the Crown and different submission processes. So it's a political decision for you. It would be quite a strong statement for the council to make, and it's a balancing act as to whether you want to go to that level or whether there's other channels we can participate in processes through each of the individual pieces of legislation.
Councillor Ponta.
Well, kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is a political decision, and it's one of those times when you sort of reach a fork in the road. I think
Ba-da-da-ba. I want to give you a pōhere, at least a karanga. Kia ora, Francis.
So, so I think that what I weigh in on is that while this paper is about government legislation and the way in which it has framed the treaty and Māori rights and interests, like Section 8 of the RMA, etc., in the past, over the last 3 decades, local government has bought into that. It has been an integral part of how we do business and how we have shaped and changed the way in which we operate. Recognising that there was a legislative provision in the Town and Country Planning Act that was much weaker than the one in the RMA, and so while the government might be looking to water down the legislation, I'm not sure that we have the luxury of actually agreeing with that or going with that course of action. And so my response to Councillor Connolly's proposal is that I think that rejection is actually appropriate. I think it's appropriate to have that strength of language to signal that this organisation has actually formed a relationship with mana whenua despite the Crown, and that relationship is now more important to us than the relationship that we have with the Crown on this particular issue. So while the Crown can flip-flop around, I think we owe it to mana whenua to remain consistent. If that means rejecting the Crown's proposals, so be it.
Kia ora. I'm going to go to Councillor Saw, Councillor Nash, and Councillor Galo.
I think my question.
Sorry, one moment. We're just having a wee intervention here. So, a quick point of order, folks. We've now moved into really effectively debating the proposition, and actually what we need to do is move the recommendations, open it up for debate, and after that process, any amendments can be debated, and then after the debate we can move for change, should there be, to the regs. Does that make sense? Sorry, kia ora, Councillor.
I just wonder, Madam Chair, before you do that, whether you want to ask the councillors whether there is a better way of, like a question that they can respond to, a better way of framing the proposal that Councillor Connolly has put on the table. Yeah, we're going to get into a language problem here, and we'll run out of movers if we're.
So, we could have a cup of tea.
Could we briefly have a cup of tea? Nice. And we'll come back to you. Kia ora, folks. Can you make 15 minutes? Yep, kia ora. coming back to the table, or is it just us? Okay, kate pai. Okay, so having taken into account the conversations that we've just finished having, I'm going to propose a new recommendation, and I'll seek someone to second that. But before that, can we have that online? So here we go. The new recommendation 4 expresses concern regarding any reduction in the protection of Māori rights and interests as guaranteed in Te Tiriti o Waitangi through government reform. Recommendation 5 affirms greater Wellington approach to protect Māori rights and interests in its submissions on the government's policy and legislative proposals. Can I seek a seconder of that? Kia ora, Ros. And now can I open that for debate? I don't have any debate.
I'm going to get in trouble procedurally, but I did suggest another noting recommendation around the amount of resources that we had invested in positioning ourselves in relation to the reforms. I don't know whether that's something you're interested in putting on the table. In relation to reforms that were reducing Māori rights.
Just going to pop it up.
So can I have I'm sorry to take Simon off the big screen, but is it okay to have the wording up in front?
Is that done, Luke?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So number 6 notes the considerable amount of resource that Greater Wellington has invested in submissions on government reforms and implementing policy decisions relating to Māori issues.
Okay. So thinking on the hoof about my comments, could I ask that when the chair takes the votes that we do each recommendation separately, and I would like to say that I support this new approach and the new wording, because for me, very supportive of the much improved and increased effort we as an organisation, as a council, has put into realising partnership with Māori. But we're also in partnership with government with a capital G. So on a day when they have announced investment into something that we've been really wanting with the Kiwi Rail, we have to be mindful of partnerships right across, and triangular and multifaceted, isn't it? I just want to say, in reading the papers before we kind of started discussing amendments or new recommendations, that I'd actually had an issue with the clarity of item number 1, because to me, we need to be quite specific in there that it is the current government, that it is what kind of reforms. Is it the entire reforms, or I just think it's kind of a little bit loose for my liking. Remembering that people will read these without the context of our discussion and debate, and potentially without the context of the supporting papers. So I wonder if we could just add in some words there, because is it just every single piece of legislation from the government, or is it particular ones? I just wasn't quite entirely clear. I thought, it's not like we're going to be writing a submission into every single piece of government legislation, are we? because that's not one person in a team, is it? I also want to note that it is standard practice for the Environment Committee and through the Transport Committee to do submissions. So I kind of hadn't understood the context of why there was these recommendations in the first place, noting that submissions have been made, as we heard, like prior to August last year for the fast track legislation. So it's actually quite common practice. So I'm not quite sure what we were kind of doing here today anyway. So thank you.
Councillor Ponta.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. That's that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure how to go about this. Recommendation 6. I appreciate that a lot of work goes into writing submissions, and we have a pretty proud tradition as a regional council, particularly because we're based in Wellington, of having done that and having led the local government sector. But I wonder whether we're writing any more of these types of submissions, perhaps on this particular topic, but whether we're doing any more than we might have been doing in the past, and whether we particularly want to draw attention to that part of our business. So I probably have a mind to remove recommendation 6. I'm just not sure how procedurally to do that. Oh, okay. Fine.
Is that right? You can vote against it?
Yes.
Yeah, no, she's all good.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Gaylor has covered all topics I wish to raise. Thank you.
Just to follow up, Councillor Lee, Councillor Nash, you had a...
I thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So I'm quite supportive of supporting the softer kind of wording. Again, I'm not sure of the real added value of 6, so I don't think I would support 6. I think it almost undermines some of the other recommendations a bit further up, like 3 and 2. So I'll probably vote against 6.
Any other points? No? Okay, so let's go to moving the recommendations. We'll start with number 1, yeah? All in favour? Recommendation 2. All in favour? Any opposed? Can we do 2 screens? Kia ora, Simon, could you please put your camera on, if you were there? Ka pai. Did you vote on recommendation 1, Simon? Can't hear you. Hand up, just hand signals. Aye. Kia ora for that. Okay. Recommendation 2. Notes Greater Wellington ongoing approach to ensure Māori rights and interests are taken into account in submission opportunities. Those aye. Against. Recommendation 3 notes Greater Wellington's ongoing commitment to uphold the integrity of our partnerships. Aye. Against. Recommendation 4 expresses concern regarding any reduction in the protection of Māori rights and interests as guaranteed in Te Tiriti or Waitangi through government reform. Aye. Against. Number 5 affirms Greater Wellington's approach to protect Māori rights and interests in its submissions on the government's policy and legislative proposals. In favour? Against? Kia ora. Number 6 notes the considerable amount of resources that Greater Wellington has invested in submissions on government reforms and implementing policy decisions relating to Māori issues. So, aye. Against. 1, Can we just record those again? And Simon.
I'm against.
The final recommendation is lost. Kia ora. That is the end of that item. Kia ora. Phew. Right.
And the presentation.
Okay. Okay. Our next item is Pathways to Partnership Kaupapa Investment Model. We've got Manuhiri from Te Runanga o Ngāti Tō Rangatira. No mai, kia ora. Come and take a seat at the table as others joining you. We've got a presentation for apologies that we'll get the presentation up. Tēnā kura, tēnā koutou, no mai, hoki mai. We'll pass it over to you to have your kōrero as we find the presentation and put it up.
Ka pai. Morena koutai, tuatahi tēnei te tukumihi atu ki a koutai, ngā kaimahi, ngā māngai o te pane matua taiao. E rere kawana ngā mihi ki a koe e oku whanaunga, Auntie Haki, tēnei te tukumihi atu ki a koe. So, kia ora everyone. My name is Amy Bishop and I am the Environmental Manager at Te Runanga o Tua Rangatira.
Morena tātou, ko Ella Jaspers toku ingoa, and I'm a Senior Resource Management Advisor for Te Manatai team at Te Runanga o Tō Rangatira, here to support Amy today.
Ka pai. So we were asked to pull together a presentation to discuss some of the kaupapa that we are working collaboratively with Greater Wellington Regional Council. And so we've pulled together a bit of a slide today to have a kōrero specifically to the things that our taiao space do. Ka pai. Next slide.
Next slide. Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
So those who are unfamiliar with the rohe of Ngāti Toa, you will see that there on the left. That's just one of our OTS maps from our settlement. So mai imeria te kākara ki whitireia, whakawhiti te moana o raukawa ki wairau ki whakatū. And that's a whakatauaki from Te Rauparaha, and it outlines the rohe or boundaries of Ngāti Toa Rangatira. And so on the screen there, it just gives you a bit of history around when we first, when my grandfather was actually one of them who petitioned for Ngāti Toa Rangatira to have its claim heard at the tribunal. In 2014, the Ngāti Toa Claim Settlement Act was passed, and then 2014 onwards, we have the privilege to work towards some of the settlement implementation, and we'll discuss some of those things today. So our Ngāti Toa Taiao team is about nurturing a resilient environment to sustain future generations, and these topics here were from the Ngāti Toa iwi strategy, so they were informed by the uri of Ngāti Toa Rangatira, and so our roles are, as above, to work towards reclaim connections in mātauranga relevant to our natural resources, to have empowered kaitiaki who are leaders and co-managers of our natural environment, and our commitment to environmental sustainability and our ability to be able to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So those are the key focus areas for our strategic taiao space and also our operational taiao space. So this next slide just outlines some of the mahi that our operational team do. So this is our Kaimanaki Whenua team, and the manager of our Kaimanaki Whenua team is Luke Barnsley. And so they do a lot of predator control, riparian planting, They work alongside Greater Wellington Regional Council to do fish passage remediation. They do cultural monitoring, iwi monitoring, and they also work in that conservation space around translocations. So this team is really critical for Ngāti Toa, particularly our people, because it's feet on the ground, and it makes a real impact in terms of them being visible out on the whenua of Ngāti Toa. And so this is the team that I'm responsible for. So we're the strategic team. So we take care of a lot of resource management matters. Within the Ngāti Toa Claims Settlement Act, there are some environmental provisions within the redress. So some of those are like the Kapiti Island Conservation Management Plan and various other provisions that we're responsible for delivering. So our climate change and sustainability, we're working towards our climate change strategy. This is one of our annual plan priorities. Iwi monitoring, fisheries and aquaculture, that's namely down in Te Tauihu in the Sounds. And just various other things, policy analysis. And we are also responsible for being actively engaged in the various legislative changes that have been coming out in this with this current coalition government.
So over recent years, the way we work together with all of our council partners, but particularly Greater Wellington, has significantly evolved. So we really have moved towards an authentic partnership model and away from a transactional approach. Greater Wellington has become a key partner in several of our team's projects through ongoing collaboration and knowledge sharing. Both organisations are strengthening their capabilities, particularly in resource management and compliance, through that two-way knowledge share.
So on the 6th of February 2025, so on Waitangi Day, we signed Te Wai a Pariroa, or the Pariroa Harbour Accord, alongside Greater Wellington Regional Council, Wellington City Council, Wellington Water and Pariroa City Council. And so prior to signing the accord, we had an established Pariroa Harbour Accord working group that involves those local authorities within the group. So currently we are working towards a short-term implementation plan together, which we aim to have that completed by the end of this financial year. And then the next financial year we'll be working towards a long-term implementation plan. So a big part of Te Awarua Poriroa is a taonga for Ngāti Toa. And it was critical that Ngāti Toa were leading the project, given that I think we could say that Ngāti Toa Uri have directly felt the impacts of the degradation of Te Awarua Poriroa. So for us it's been critical that we embed Western science with mātauranga Māori. It's been critical for us too to have a space where there's that data sharing, particularly around mapping, and that is led by Ngāti Toa cultural monitoring frameworks. The Pariroa Harbour Accord, although it may not be the absolute solution, we needed a starting point in terms of reversing the degradation of Te Awarua Poriroa. I mean, it falls into the remit of various local authorities, but no one had really, whether it was just because it was a challenge, too big of a challenge, no one had really taken up the mantle until now. And so this space is pretty critical for us in terms of I suppose participation for all those who have rima over Te Awaroa or Porirua. What I will say though is this has absolutely, the signing of the Porirua Harbour Accord has definitely strengthened those partnerships between Ngāti Toa and Greater Wellington Regional Council, and promises their ongoing commitment to reversing the degradation of Te Awaroa Porirua.
The next thing that I'll speak about is the development of the Ngāti Toa Iwi Environmental Management Plan, which many of the Greater Wellington kaimahi in this room have been an amazing support in helping us with this project. So the way that we've worked together on the Iwi Environmental Management Plan is co-design and internal support for the plan development. We've received technical advice, advice around planning language and how to align the iwi Environmental Management Plan with our settlements. And we've also received a lot of other offers of support, and which many will take up, sharing relevant environmental data, GIS mapping support, and policy and legislative analysis.
Okay, go on. So this next slide is about investment in co-design and co-planning. And so this, as Ella had alluded to in a couple of slides before, this has been critical in terms of, sorry, I'm just sorry. This has been critical in terms of our relationship with Greater Wellington Regional Council. And so co-design and joint planning has been more around how we work together as partners in the things such as the development of our reserve management plans, the catchment management plans, or the whaitua mahi, the co-design and restoration projects. So those are smaller projects like mahi that we're working alongside Greater Wellington with at Battle Hill. And it helps us to have that knowledge sharing space with Greater Wellington Regional Council, particularly around any cultural impacts. We have, which is one of the provisions in our settlement, it's the Whitirea Park Board. So we are able to make decisions for Whitirea, which is our tūpunamanga, around what happens within Whitirea Park. We also have our shared monitoring frameworks for the Porirua Harbour Accord. We work alongside Greater Wellington in the our operation space in the pest and biodiversity space. I suppose that, I'll just keep talking. The main purpose of this slide in terms of what it means for Ngāti Toa to have the Greater Wellington Environmental Group strategic framework aligned with Te Rūnanga o Toa's taiao priorities is that it recognises the status of Ngāti Toa as mana whenua and as a treaty partner in taiao governance. It embeds that shared responsibility in managing and delivering positive outcomes for the taiao. And it upholds the kaitiaki responsibilities of Ngāti Toa. It demonstrates our long-term commitment as partners, and it fosters a mutual understanding and knowledge sharing of Mātauranga Māori and Western science, and it reduces barriers to achieve sustainable outcomes for both Ngāti Toa and Greater Wellington Regional Council, and it gives effect to tino rangatiratanga.
So what we hope for the future is that we will work together for the preservation and protection of our significant sites, continue with work such as the Porirua Harbour Accord, continue working together for the restoration of Te Awarua o Porirua, active kaitiakitanga, reclaimed mātauranga, empowered leaders and co-managers of our natural environment together. and succession planning for our future generations. Ngā mihi, thank you everyone, and if anyone has any questions or things I'd like to discuss, if you have time, we're happy for them.
Let's open it up to see if there are any pārtai from the group. Kia ora, Ros.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation today, and sorry we didn't have the technology working better. I'm just wondering, no doubt you're aware of the government's proposed new wastewater standards and the fact that that will severely restrict what Greater Wellington can do in terms of, so no one will be permitted to put a more stringent standard than those wastewater standards, and so it will severely restrict what Greater Wellington can do in terms of setting desirable standards that will actually achieve an improvement in Te Awaroa or Porirua. So I guess I'm asking, if those standards do come into place and we have that kind of tool removed from us, how would you see Greater Wellington participating in the accord? What do you think we could do if that comes into effect, and how would you like us to act and to deliver in light of those standards?
You may want to add to what I
Yeah.
have, but we did submit on the wastewater standards, and we definitely see the pros and cons of this. For those wastewater treatment plants that are already working above those standards, this actually could be seen as a downfall, as you say. How do there's almost a sense of encouraging some treatment plants to lessen how well they're working, to be aligned with the new standards. I think that there's still a lot of ways, and that Porirua Harbour Accord isn't going anywhere, so we can still kind of brainstorm ways how we can work together, and I think this will be a long ongoing discussion, so I definitely don't have the answer at this stage, but I think through active partnership and continuing to work together, we can still do what we can for the betterment of Te Awaroa or Porirua.
Yeah, and just to add to what Ella has said, so we worked with Taumata Arawai on a case study of the Tiriti Bay wastewater treatment plant. So we were aware of the direction of central government in terms of implementing standards. From my understanding of the new national standards will be that the consent conditions won't change until after the consent's expired.
Yeah.
I think currently the Tiriti Bay wastewater treatment plant
only recently has a new consent.
Yeah, it's only recently been renewed for another 30 years, I believe. That's not to say that Ngāti Toa aren't looking into other innovative solutions for wastewater treatment, and we have invested in some new technology that will be a case study up on the Kapiti coast. So, yeah.
Yeah, in short, if the consent is for 30 years, we imagine there'll probably be some change to those standards within that consent time frame and before the restrictions around how well or not well the treatment plant can be performing will change within that 30-year time frame.
Are you able to share that case study?
Yes, so it is publicly available, the case study.
Okay.
It should be online, but we can get the links into you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Saul.
Kia ora, thank you so much for your presentation. I just had it was really exciting to hear about the environmental management plans. I was just wondering, in the partnership you have with Greater Wellington, where the broader outcomes or the less direct te taio elements come into the relationship, particularly say how we organise transport, because that does have a very, very material bearing on te taio and the aspirations that are in your presentation. I guess some of the settings we have around housing as well, as best we can in this current legislative environment, and with that the policy and regulation settings as well. So where do you see that fitting in the partnership of some of that broader systemic stuff to meet those aspirations?
I think that it may be beyond the kind of remit of our team.
Yeah.
But my role, new kind of role that I've been put into is the relationship manager for Greater Wellington and Te Rūnanga o tō Rangatira. So even if it falls beyond the kind of borders of what Te Mana Tile does, then I hope that I can be the person that's best placed to let those kaimahi at Greater Wellington know who would be best to talk to, who in the organisation would work in that space. However, we have done some work with the regional transport plan and hopefully continue to do that work. And the Rūnanga is large and has many different teams, so things that fall beyond what we do directly. We have a large housing and development team, and so there's many other spaces that I'm sure Greater Wellington can work closely with the Rūnanga that may fall beyond. So I'll let you know who to go to.
Any other comments, questions? Carl? Hey, thank you very much for that. That's a nice entry into the next conversation, which is about pathways to awesome partnerships. Kia ora e ngā mihi tū Ngāti tō Rangatira. You are a very big organisation, have grown so much over the last 7 years, and we look forward to continued engagement with you. So kia ora. Who's coming up for the next paper? Kia ora tān. You're welcome to sit in if you need to.
Kia ora koutou. I'll walk us through the paper in front of us, but I just also want to mihi Ngāti Toa actually in the Environment Court this week, but they managed to squeeze us in so that they could present how important actually our relationship is across this kaupapa. But a quick walk through the paper just to really think about some of the change and shifts in the way that we are presenting our partnership space. But before we do that, I just want to share that it has been significant shifts from transactional to partnership mahi, which our mana whenua partners have also shared their experience. And it has been a lot of work, and we've done that as a kahui or a collective of directors from the environment group and Te Hunga Whiriwhiri. So it's been a partnership internally to work through and reframe and rethink how we bring life into partnership. A lot of information is inside the paper, but I could just draw your attention to page 33 and the transaction to partnership piece that just talks about our funding model and shifting away from a procurement of services to actually partnering on outcomes that are meaningful. As two partnering organisations that are responsible for the taiao. So some of those shifts and changes have been what Ngāti Toa talked about today. If I could also just talk about the table. There's a table on page 35, and the shifts in this and the move away from statements of contract to kaupapa investment. And again, Ngāti Toa have probably already done my presentation for me, but also in the appendix is the aligning of iwi priorities across all 6 iwi, reframed and probably measured up against our own te whāriki, and then it moves into programs of work. So there's a clear alignment between each of our organisations' priorities in the taiao space, which is really important in partnering, and also our approach to that, which is mana ki te mata. And actually Nigel and our GMs were instrumental in providing that space to kōrero up front around how we deliver on outcomes together rather than procuring for services and shifting away from that. We're also currently probably be ready for our next committee meeting, but talking about systems-led approaches to reporting mechanisms around as well across a range of kaupapa, but also our health and partnership space as a collective, how we are going to measure that and make sure that we keep evolving and growing and strengthening our partnership alongside the kaupapa and operational mahi as well. So that's something that's quite exciting, and there's a few people in the room who have been responsible for bringing that forward as well. So we'll start to see some real shifts and I'm going to say trailblazing mahi start to come through in this space. There's not many other councils working in this space, so we're also working with other councils too to bring them up to the opportunities that we're presenting through investing and partnering across outcomes. So that's the paper, and just noting the recommendations, which I think there's 4. There's 3. Kia ora.
Okay, any part-time comments before we get into the recs? No? Okay, so what we've got here is recommendation 1, endorse Te Pane Matua Taio, Greater Wellington's approach to mana whenua priorities to lead the way we partner and invest in impactful results and striving for partnership excellence. Can I have someone move? Sorry. I did, I asked that, but that's right, we can go back to that. Questions, comments?
Reading this, I have a certain level of concern's too strong a word, because I'm not unhappy with the general concept. But I find the recommendations, especially 1 and 2, I'm struggling to get my head around exactly what they mean, because there's a lot of words in here about partnership, co-design, shared power, but there's nothing in here really about our bottom line of costs, which is what comes back to us when we get to LTP and annual plan. And so I guess what my question is, when we say we're looking at, we're endorsing the approach for mana whenua priorities to lead the way, what exactly does that mean? What does that mean to our budget? If the general public that I have to front up to doesn't actually agree, where does that then sit? And then when I get to notes the shift in funding model, while I understand what we're doing, we're going from transactional, i.e. here's some money to do this for us, to I get that. But what I'm not entirely sure of is that within the existing budgets that we have, is it expanded budget? Is it expanded in its program generally? Yeah, is it different from what we decided in the LTP? So I'm sorry I'm not being really crisp with my question, but these are where the concerns are sitting for me.
I could just mention that it's actually, there is no new money. It's funding that's already purposeful towards projects. So it's just a shift in the way and how we are doing it, rather than there's no new money involved in the current way that we work. It's just shifting so that there's partnership outcomes at the top. And the priorities around the mahi is making sure that we are aligning with mana whenua on those priorities. And you'll see in the appendix, it's not across all of our mahi, it's across mahi that we share. So it just ensures a better outcome at the end. Probably, hopefully exceeding expectations on delivery, if that answers your pātai.
Yeah, thank you. My concern's a little bit the same, and I raised it last week or the week before, particularly because we're talking about the Waitua and Pororua, and I felt that it's taken too long to get to the stage of the accord, and not enough effort has been made in actually taking action there, and time wasted is time lost as far as we're concerned in that there. And I note through the points you had in the presentation there, the kaupapa investment, it's capacity based on mana whenua capacity and desires and that. And I'm concerned that there's 2 levels of mana whenua involvement. One is in our oversight and management, and that's fine, I understand that. That's not shouldn't be a barrier to us time-wise. The second thing is mana whenua do a lot of the planting there at the moment, and they're involved in a lot of the work around the inlet and that. And so my concern is that at the end of the day is that we do a lot of planning here, but we should be looking at outcomes, and we should be making sure that most of our funding goes to outcomes, to getting things fixed here. And I'm really concerned that, like the Waitua and up the coast where you are, where there's a lot of money spent in the planning for it, and that I think over $1 million, if I remember rightly, and it was questioned that why does it take us so long for the planning and cost so much? Let's look at how we're spending money on outcomes, because that's a result where I get questioned all the time as a councillor for Pororua, and there's a lot of concern about Māori involvement and things. And I say, well, 80% of our Māori involvement are interests in common with all of the people there. And also I've got Māori daughter and granddaughter and that, and so I sort of cross over the camps to some degree as well, sort of thing. And I am really concerned that in the end, from a Greater Wellington point of view, there needs to be a greater emphasis on money funding outcomes. And if we can see that in our budgets, it's easy for me to sit back and be happy about the relationship, how we're working together and what we're achieving. But when it's planning, it's talking about what we're going to do. And I've found in life that talking is important, but it's more important what we actually do at the end of the day. And that's what impacts on all of the community and that. And so I just want to make the emphasis there that I don't want to end up, I'd hate to think in a few more years that we're looking and saying, why is it taking us so long to progress the things there? And I can understand if it's a funding issue, but we just need to, I think there's the opportunity to do better for all of us here. And I just want to make sure that the same pressures that I feel as a councillor, whose responsibility is to represent all of the people in the community, that mana whenua feel the same way about the urgency of getting on with this and making sure that we're getting good value for the money we're putting into there. So the other things I'm
Thank you,
worried about.
Councillor. But before I just go to, I come to you too, can I just get the officials to have a quick think about a response to that very important question around the cost of Waitua planning, the length of Waitua planning versus actually implementation of Waitua planning, which actually is at a partnership level, I'm going to assume. So, kia ora, Councillor Bassett.
Well, I just really was curious about whether recommendations are talking about resources, money we're talking about, but it also says in the paper that the, I just can't quite find it now under the finance, where it actually said something to the effect that's had no effect on the budget or no finance, and I saw that as a contradiction, and I wasn't. And I think it actually said something about taking monies from other buckets, so to speak. What was being sacrificed, and it doesn't talk about that. Yes, it's 16 and 17 talk about there's no financial implications, but clearly I think there is looking at the recommendations. And then at 17, I think, beg your pardon, it talks in 16, it talks about investing fund, which is drawn from existing budgets. So I just saw that as a bit of inconsistency and it wasn't clear.
Thank you. I think actually that might mean we actually just need to supplement the recommendation with some of the conversation around whether or not this does have financial implications and actually it's not an increase in funding. So can somebody have a think about that while I turn to Councillor Connolly?
So my question is, on page 35, you've got that table, which is like compares the previous model of funding to the kaupapa investment model. Could you, something that I feel is missing from that table is a reflection on assurance and how assurance works and who mana whenua are accountable to for this funding. So it is so we've moved away from a traditional transactional model where we say plant 10 trees, here's $10, and then it's easy for us to look and see whether someone's planted 10 trees, but how do we assess the value of the kaupapa investment, and is it even Greater Wellington's role to do that, or should mana whenua be being held accountable in their own structures.
Great patai. So there are a couple of things in place to grow confidence in that space, because it's a new space for all of us. That we have quarterly reporting, two-way reporting actually between mana whenua and ourselves, and it's also against budget lines, but it's bigger than that as well. So it's almost an enhanced way of reporting mechanism for how we deliver on kaupapa. But the difference also is that it's co-designed at the beginning, so that the outcomes and the outputs are thought about as a combined group. So I think what we expect to see is that we'll have enhanced reporting and outcomes across this mahi. And just going back to that, why we've moved away from outputs and outcomes driven mahi, there are still outputs inside each of the components. It's another layer that thinks about actually how do we do this together, and is it outcome driven, so does it meet priorities?
I guess just as a comment, I wanted to say that one of the things I love about the kaupapa approach is that I'm hoping that mana whenua will stand alongside council when it comes to providing assurance to the community. So, for example, when we talk about the changes that we've made in Porirua Harbour, that Greater Wellington won't be standing alone in terms of saying we've achieved this or we haven't achieved this. So when we provide that assurance back to the community, I see the kaupapa approach as providing real value and sharing the load as much as sharing the money.
Thank you. Before I make a quick statement, sorry, did the officials want to quickly? Chris raised some really good questions around that.
Kia ora, through the chair, Nicola Patrick, Catchment Director. Probably in response to the discussion, absolutely understand that concern around investment in planning versus outcomes, and we all are constantly conscious of that balance. But as we know, planning is a necessary part of the system, particularly when the whaitua is also delivering on government requirements around the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management. So some of that is an actual responsibility for us to carry. But it also has led to a solid basis to build these more structured relationships that we're hearing about. And it also provides opportunities for us to coordinate with other significant players, including Ngāti Toa, but also Porirua City Council, Wellington Water and others. On your question around whaitua implementation progress, we do have a report coming to the June meeting of the Environment Committee, where we'll provide another of our 6 monthly updates on progress made. There are definitely still gaps, and that is related to resourcing and also the challenge of some of those recommendations over time. So we absolutely know there is more to go, which is why we're really committed and an active partner in the Harbour Accord, which is going to bring together whaitua recommendation implementation in a more integrated partnership model. And finally, I think Councillor Connolly was referring to the appendix to this paper, where you see a little snapshot of how we're structuring it in the kaupapa agreement space. And you will see there is still resourcing for planning included. But that is how we work together, is we have to come together and resource the conversations and the connections so that we get greater value from our programs. But you'll also see some very specific operational outcomes where we're trying really hard to align how we have outcomes under your guidance connected to our strategic framework that absolutely align with the iwi environmental management plan and other strategic goals of Ngāti Toa, for the example of the Ngāti Toa kaupapa agreement, where we are bringing that together. And that involves some specific programs of work that Ngāti Toa leads directly in terms of monitoring in the harbour, including aspects of mahinga kai. So it is an ongoing journey of improvement, but it is grounded in this shift in commitment to partnership.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Gaylor and then Councillor Staples.
Oh, yeah, I keep getting missed. Do you want to go first? Oh, yeah, So I just want to check with the recommendations and the kind of conversations that have been explored here through the questions. Just for clarity for me, is this actually different or just endorsing the kaupapa funding that we set up in our long-term plan 2 long-term plans ago, 4 years ago?
You're right, it's an enhanced version of it actually, around the way that we bundled our funding to now just shifting it to the next step of investing. So it's repackaging current funding, layers of levels of funding into a way that actually brings life to partnership rather than transaction.
Could we have an example, like help me with, because I don't do the negotiations, I don't know that I've ever seen an agreement. So what would be an example of something?
I think in the appendix is that what you're asking, Arohama? Yeah, in the appendix is a little bit of, I've taken the funding amounts out, but it shows the line from priorities of mana whenua to our own, to the environment group, because it's a tile piece, into the programs of work that will be co-designed and the words inside that, if that supports your pātai.
I did see that, and I guess I just, so in here, where is measurement? How do I read that?
I've taken those out because they're very specific around funding requirements, but we can do that maybe in a different setting. Go through that.
These are great questions, and I'm going to come back to a recommendation afterwards, if that's right. If I can just give some, thank you.
I mean, where we signed up to the new model of funding, like 4 years ago, and we haven't kind of had that loop back to us. So that would be really cool because, it got full support around the table. So it'd be good to see that it was doing what we wanted, what the intent was.
Which then leads you into the evolution. Kia ora, Councillor Swarr, and then Councillor Staples, if that's okay.
Kia ora, thank you. Just a couple of thoughts from here. I guess picking up on some of the comments some of my colleagues have made, it's that assurance is to ensure endurance of this funding, for the next triennium. So I guess that's where I'd say we're all coming from, is to be able to ensure that the fund goes on, because so much of this establishment work and relationship building is happening. And I wonder whether sometimes that upfront relationship building, while it seems slow or it doesn't seem like outcomes are being reached, that relationship and co-design engagement space does mean better, faster in the medium term. So things may increase in pace. So wondering if that's part of the whakaaro of the approach, and whether that can be part of the assurance as well. Because sometimes when these things are being set up, you can't see what the benefits and the increasing speed will be down the track. And I was wondering whether, like we have a long-term plan that signals our intergenerational aspirations and, our 10-year plan, how that might be signalled in some of those kaupapa funding agreements, or whether that's not possible as the relationship building is happening, because then that might give us a sense of direction and assurance as well. I know that was in the presentation, but it sounds like we need a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that we'll draw on that next time that we come together. But I do want to press on us the presentation we had just heard from our mana whenua partner, and quite likely we might not have had the same presentation a couple of years ago. So I just want to recognise that you're right, it is slow moving because it is building trust and developing that up, and we do intend on what does it look longer term. But I think we'll bring that back to another.
It's also
part of that evolution. Just round off with, say, for example, like many of the projects we've been involved in that may not be mana whenua partnership projects. I'm thinking of things like Riverlink, or even Transmission Gully, or even RAP, Let's Get Wellington Moving. These things move at pace, and then there's lots of stuff that we actually haven't ironed out, and then we found out subsequently. So perhaps that relationship building and co-design is to ensure those sorts of snags don't happen down the track.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me have another bite at the pie. Still on my funding worries, I can understand completely how kaupapa funding sits at our governance level with co-design, relationship building, etc. But some of what we do is transactional, i.e. needing a cultural assessment for a I've lost the word, it's gone. But needing a cultural assessment for a consent that we're requiring. So do I have assurance that if we move to this kaupapa funding, that we are not suddenly going to be presented with an invoice saying, oh, but this is over and above what you've already agreed to fund us because this is a transaction, for want of a better word.
So we've touched on the investment model today. There are still procurement pathways as a preferred supplier, which sits alongside this, but in a different category. So what I'm saying is that what you see today is a partnership investment model. The procurement of getting expertise and supplier still remains in place. And I can just give you an example around planting that remains in a procurement space for supplier. Yeah, Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually wondering if we could ask the officials to take the paper away and come back with a bit more clarity around some of the recommendations as an action point. Is that the way? It's no, it's not, we're not in a hurry. We could do that at the next. Wait. So I look to my left. We'll just get the standard practice.
Are we just letting the paper lie then?
Letting the paper lie?
If councillors aren't comfortable with the recommendations, there's been excellent conversations.
I agree.
The conversation's been fantastic. If councillors are not comfortable with recommendations, you've got two options really. We can work on the recommendations, or we are quite happy to bring a paper back, noting the conversations and questions that have been raised today. We can bring another paper on kaupapa funding with some responses to some of the questions been raised. You could let it sit on the table if you wanted. I don't think, fundamentally, there's two notings and an endorse. If there's not a degree of comfort around the endorsing recommendation, then we can either reword that, and there may be some suggestions there from Elizabeth.
Councillor Gaylor?
Darren, were you first? I was going to, I support line on the table. I think for me, it's primarily what's behind the recommendations is that maybe I needed more detail because we haven't had this before. And like when we were having the Environment Committee last Thursday in Masterton, and colleagues around the table were asking for, how do we measure that we're doing better in the environment? This to me is that. So what's the kind of information so I can see the measure of the kaupapa funding that we put in place and have been spending and investing for the last 4 years? How do we see that the relationships, the partnerships are growing in strength and enduring in strength, and therefore what is being delivered for our Paitua or for other kind of projects or whatever, so that's for me what is the information there.
Kia ora, Councillor. Councillor Staples, did you have something further to say?
Not really. I was just going to say I'm comfortable with letting the paper lie, and for me I think it's just about having some more information rather than needing to go over what we've already discussed again.
Kia ora. I agree as the chair. It would be great. So here's my recommendation that the item of business being discussed does lie on the table and not be further discussed at this meeting. Can I have someone say kia ora, Councillor Gaylor? And then those in favour, please say. Agreed. Kia ora. Right, that brings us to the end of our for you today. Short. I thought it was going to be shorter than that. We've got a workshop after this, but I think we're going to be guided by our team. It'll be a good quick one. Let me close our hui today. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te aratakatā. Koia, rā te rongo, whakaiake ki runga, kia tina, tina, hui e. Tā kia ora folks, thank you. Ngā mihi nui, ngā te tō, kia ora.